And what the inmates learned how to do was they took a sock and they took that cup. They filled the cup with water and then put a trash bag around it so that the water would stay in there. Put that cup in the sock and used it like a nunchuck, and were absolutely cracking people over the skull with it within like 5 days of giving them cups. Howdy, y'all. My name is Mike. I live in Houston, Texas, and for the sake of this video, if you are new to my videos, I'll also tell you that I am a police officer in the great state of Texas. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to Norway's prisons are different than America's. It's worth noting, I worked in a jail here in the United States for almost 2 years before I went to patrol for 4 years, and now I currently am a crime scene investigator. After rereading up on some of my policy, I found out that it's probably not a good idea for me to be drinking when I'm representing myself as a cop. So today I got coffee. You can't see it. I swear it's coffee. Super quick before we start this video, just want to give a real quick shout out to the Drunk Texan Says members. Thank you guys so much for helping out the channel. But anyways, let's get into this video.
Staying in a maximum security prison is not a normal life, but that's also an ambition, to reduce the feeling of being in a prison as much as possible.
And in here you have my cell. So I have DVD and movies from there.
The basic question that we ask ourselves in Norway.
So right away, I could say that no, absolutely not. Inmates will take anything that they can and turn it into contraband. So they would take that DVD player and it would be a tattoo gun in like 15 minutes. I've worked in the jail where they started pulling the fire alarms and used the wiring of the fire alarms and light fixtures and stuff to turn them into tattoo guns. They could also easily break off a piece of that and it becomes a shank or a knife or whatever you want to call it. So already, no. No DVD players. Well, we do have TVs. So the inmates in our jails have a TV that they can control. They're not allowed to have a remote because it'll be a tattoo gun in 10 minutes. They're allowed to have board games and TVs. But I feel like the primary reason for that is not to be nice. It's a level of control. So if a tank starts to get rowdy, even if it's just 1 or 2 people, you take their TV away, which you control the TV's power from the pickets, and which the inmates do not have access to. The purpose that serves is that the tank tends to correct itself when their TV gets taken away. So whatever the problem child was, now he has a tank full of people he's locked in with that are pissed off at him. We don't do that often. I mean, usually we just say, hey guys, knock it off. And then we'll come in for 2, say, hey, look, y'all about to lose y'all's TVs. So knock it off. I'm for real. And usually they'll fix themselves.
What kind of neighbor do we really want? Because they could move into my neighborhood and they could move into your neighborhood. So I think this is an important question to ask ourselves, really.
True.
That should have an influence on how we work inside prisons.
Yeah.
It's not for the prison.
I wonder, though, if that is a societal thing, or maybe there's certain things that are illegal here that are not illegal there. Could just be culturally, maybe less people commit crimes over there. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that Norway has more effective prisons. It could, though.
To judge or to punish, we have to interact.
That's true.
And be human. I think it's as simple as that.
The trip is for inspiration to go bold back in the United States.
More about Halden then. How do we work and what are the unique things about us?
So A couple things I'll already say is, I wonder how much of this are cultural changes or cultural differences, because I agree with that one guard that said that the job of detention is not punishment. And that's true. But if you're put in prison, the being put in prison is the punishment for your crime, right? At the same time, it's not supposed to be a, retreat paradise. You know what I mean? Say someone killed someone. Part of the criminal justice system here in America is guided towards giving someone a fair punishment for what they committed. And if we're sending, say, a murderer to one of these prisons that's like a utopia or something, that does a disservice to the victim. Maybe this is a prison for minor offenders, things like that. Because even within the jail that I worked at, we had housing units that were much more open, and the inmates had much more freedom based on their classification levels. The way they're classified is their risk of violence, right? We'll see, but I can already see an issue with how the victims would feel about someone who did them dirty, right? Did them very wrong, and then allowed them to just go to this great utopia place that they can go shopping and they have their own DVD players and stuff. So I don't know. Let's see. Let's learn more. Maybe I'll come around.
And in here you have my cell. So I have DVD and movies from there. Here we have a real toilet with a shower and everything. You can see everybody have their key, so they can open or close the doors.
They have their own keys.
Even though it's nice here, it's still not a summer camp. But I would like you to, look beyond the facilities. It's not the most important thing.
So this is the cell. Every cell is similar. And here we have the kitchen, where I used to prepare the food. You can see here, it's inside here.
That's a really important principle in Norway, which talks about that taking someone's liberty away and taking them away from their family, away from their community, that in of itself is the punishment. So life inside prisons should look as normal to life in the community as possible.
And in here, you have this washing room. You can wash the clothes and dry it.
They have access to washers and dryers.
Security prison is
Access to stuff like that, like kitchen utensils and stuff. Technically, the inmates do have access to that. So at the jail I worked at, and I imagine most correctional facilities in the U.S., the inmates cook the food for all the inmates. A lot of times, the inmates will wash the clothing and bedding of the other inmates too. However, those require very strict supervision. Some of these things that I'm seeing that they have access to are just huge safety hazards. First of all, having their own key. If one inmate gets a hold of another inmate's key, it's like a blackmail type of situation. You know what I mean? And then it could be a cultural difference, but an inmate that goes to snitch to an officer that another inmate stole his key, even if the officers resolve the issue and give him his key back, now he's got a target on his back for snitching, So there's a lot of things that they don't have access to in our prisons for their own safety. That key you could lock it in your hands and easily use it as a weapon. This has got to be just a non-violent prison, because there are so many throwed off people in America in our prison system. I've seen people we made a mistake one time that we gave them all their own cups. There were these plastic cups that weren't even heavy or nothing. And what the inmates learned how to do was they took a sock and they took that cup, they filled the cup with water, and then put a trash bag around it so that the water would stay in there, put that cup in the sock and used it like a nunchuck, and were absolutely cracking people over the skull with it. Within like 5 days of giving them cups, they had turned it into this legitimate weapon that could seriously injure or kill someone. It doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? It's not, some of this stuff that's not allowed, it's not because we're mean, we're not laughing, ha ha ha, you don't have a DVD player. Because our job is not to punish as officers or detention officers. It's to keep them safe while they serve their sentence. That's our job. So we have to keep them safe. And we also have to understand things like how they almost always will not come report an issue to us, because even if we solve the issue, the amount of crap they're going to get from the other inmates makes it not worth it. So they'll just find a way to tolerate it. And so by taking a lot of this stuff away, it prevents situations like that from even happening in the first place.
life.
And I notice you're wearing just You're just wearing normal clothes.
Yeah. That's allowed. You can wear whatever you want.
But that's also an ambition, to reduce the feeling of being in a prison as much as possible. That's, you know, the normality principle.
How you can normalize the correctional setting for individuals to transition out. Bigger challenge in our system, but definitely something to think about. The commissary, the stores, where an individual actually gets to go to a real store and pick out commissary items. I think that's a good adds to the normalization.
So we have commissary in American jails too, but the way the inmates don't have access to go into the store. Well, there will be trustee inmates, I guess, that help the company fulfill the orders, but we'll give the inmates requests. They actually have kiosks now. They have little touchscreen kiosks in the cells that they can order their food, but of course it has to be put in a super protective thing, because guess what they're going to do if they can access the wiring inside the kiosk? You guessed it, tattoo gun. So they use a touchscreen thing and it sends it to a private company that we use. The private company fills the order, and then twice per week at our specific jail, twice a week they come in and they'll deliver all of the commissary. So they can get stuff like ramen noodles, they can get chips, or if you're in the UK, I think you call them crisps. They can get ice cream, but unfortunately it's melted sometimes. You pretty much got to eat that right away or it's going to melt. You can get sodas, soft drinks, all that stuff, but someone on the outside world has to put money on your books in order for you to do that. But we do have that, at least.
We think this is the most important part. Dynamic security sounds like a very fancy thing, but it's really just having a normal interpersonal relations between the officers, or all staff really, and the inmates. Every inmate has a primary contact officer, and every officer had to have 2 or 3 inmates that he is the contact officer for. That was the ambition.
2 or 3?
From guard to also be a social worker.
So that's kind of true and kind of not true. As far as our training, so when I got hired on, I was 23 years old and had 0 experience whatsoever. In the first 5 minutes in the jail, the inmates started making fun of me because I had pimples. It's horrible. What you learn in the jail is it's not too different from that. It's just human instinct. So at the end of the day, even in the most well-staffed jail in the world, there's going to be way more inmates than officers. The way that you conduct your business, the easiest way to handle it is to earn the respect of the inmates. The way you do that is saying what you mean and meaning what you say. If you tell an inmate you're going to do something, you do it. If you can't do it, don't tell him you can, leave, and hope he forgets. You got to tell him, I can't do that for you. I'm sorry. Maybe explain why. By doing that, you earn the respect of the inmates. And so when you ask them to do something, they'll almost always do it because you've earned their respect. When it comes to training, I went to I think it was 3 weeks long. Might have been 2, but we went to a jail school. So it was 2 40-hour week training. At the time, I felt like it was pretty extensive, but compared to 2 years, that's a lot. That's a lot of training. I mean, kudos to them. But we do have social workers, and we recognize that it'd be better when an inmate does get released that they have had some access to things. So in the jail that I worked at, we had a GED program, which I'll put what that is here. But essentially, it's if you did not graduate high school, it's a program you can go through in our jail to get your GED, which is the equivalent of a high school diploma. We had Alcohol Anonymous classes. We had Narcotics Anonymous classes. We had religious and chaplain services. We had, you did have access to social workers depending on your case. We had mental health training experts in the jail. It's a company that's what they do is provide mental health services. And so they could request one, and then we would schedule them an appointment to the best we could, because a lot of people wanted that service. We would get them in there as fast as we could, and they would sit down with someone who is not related to the court system, not a police officer, not a guard, and they were allowed to talk to them one-on-one and get the mental health services that they needed. We're trying, man. It's just the number one thing is safety because of gang violence and stuff. We have to keep the inmates safe. And it's a lot of times to do that, we cannot let them have access to all of these things that I'm seeing in this video.
The main subjects at the academy: ethics, psychology, communication technique, criminology, law, human rights. Of course, they do learn self-defense, they do learn extraction techniques, they do learn to work as a team, but that's not, that's not the major components. It's about how do you treat people respectfully.
My family always think that I just play games, because that's why I like very much to play games. So I often play cards and stuff with inmates.
I know in some states it's forbidden and will have consequences for you if you interact with inmates as a staff member. Quite the opposite here. We expect and demand an interaction between staff and inmates.
That's not true. I mean, if you can interact with the inmates in a positive way, it is very much encouraged to what we refer to the jail climate, or if you worked in a prison, the prison climate. So it all comes down to, at the end of the day, if the inmates wanted to riot or whatever, you'd have a bad time. It's best to keep the jail climate calm and cool. I would say that inmate interactions that are positive are encouraged. I've walked around, I've cracked jokes with inmates, they crack jokes with me. Playing cards and stuff, I don't know if it's strictly forbidden from policy, but it comes down to officer safety. If you're sitting there playing cards with an inmate, something else could be going on in the jail that you don't know about that requires your attention, but because you're distracted playing cards, you're not going to know about it. If you're in a tank with 48 guys and you're distracted by a card game, you could be swarmed or taken, inmates will do stuff to you to get your keys or your radio or whatever.
Friendship with someone, and to see the progress and see the changes, that's the best with the job.
The contact officer is, for example, sitting down with you and making you a future plan. So what steps by steps to become a free man.
From day one?
Yeah.
So the officers need to know everything about the system and give advice to the inmates about, the future, what steps should they take.
Photos of my daughter, big love of my life. I've been here for 1.5 years, but I was transferred from a prison in Brazil. You can compare that to come from hell to heaven. So it's a big difference.
I bet.
The guards, first of all. In Brazil, the guards are more you feel bad and weakness, the more they feel good. Here you have the guards, they was very kind to me when I came. They are still very kind. We can speak, they treat me as a human being. In Brazil, you get treated like an animal.
I've been working there since
I don't know
the opening in
but I can see it.
2010. And I've been working in other prisons before that also. It's not for the prison to judge or to punish, because the police catch the guy, goes to the court, and it gets a sentence perhaps, and then it comes to prison with that. We have to interact and be human. I think it's as simple as that. It really is, because we can create walls between us, but that doesn't help anything. We have to communicate, we have to interact.
Without approaching people with respect and dignity, it's impossible to sit down the next day and talk about his future, because he will not have any trust in you. So in order to work well with reintegration and future planning, etc., there has to be a foundation there of trust between the staff and the inmates.
I've visited a lot of prisons in the United States as well, and somehow I don't have the same kind of feeling of relief of getting out of an impressive environment that I've experienced coming out of those prisons. I think that says something about how different the environment is here.
I think I have big opportunities here to prepare myself for the life after prison. I thought there is still hope, there is still opportunities, to get a good life after getting out. So
I'm curious
yeah.
what he did, though. That's a big thing. So all in all, I think that it's easier the more experience you get to be, treat someone like a human. And whether they are just arrested on a little minor drug charge or they're, sex offenders or something, as officers and guards, you can't treat them differently because of that, with the exception of their classification. But all in all, I think it just comes down to culture. I mean, I think that it's being objective. I would say it sounds smart to set up inmates for reintegration into society, because an issue we have in the United States is, say someone gets sentenced to 10 years in prison and they're used to prison life. And when they come out, they usually do not have a good time. They don't have an easy time coming back into our society. I would concede that we could use a lot of help in that way. I'd be curious. I guarantee you that's not how all of Norway's prisons are. Surely they have some kind of high security type of thing. But all in all, it's a little kumbaya for me. But I would be open, if I had any say or decision-making power in the American prison system, which I don't, I would be open to experimenting with this. It would be good if inmates get arrested and when they come out, they don't do it again. But part of the deterrence philosophy here in America is they go to prison and when they leave, they say, oh my God, that place was horrible. I never want to go back there again. That was really interesting. It's interesting to open your eyes up to other possibilities of doing things. It's very easy to get stuck in your ways when it's all you know. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, feel free to subscribe. And anyways, be safe.